So, as we have already said, when we refer to the yoga, Raj Yoga of Patanjali, it is normally meant that the 8 steps which are there. So that we will briefly discuss because they have put that on the chat. So we will discuss the 8 limbs, but also when yoga term is used in the Gita, it does not necessarily mean that. Okay, so that's what does it mean? We will see. Okay. And Sankhya also is Jnana Yoga. And when Sri Krishna uses the word Gita, the yoga, it is normally the Karma Yoga. Okay, it uses these terms a little flexibly. So, I'm reading each sentence and then we will get into the details. Nor is this yoga, the yoga as referred to in the Gita, it is not the yoga system of Patanjali, for that's a purely subjective method of yoga. Subjective method, that means you don't do any asanas. No, you do that in the Raj Yoga. There are many things, but the yoga of the Gita is purely subjective. Okay, you don't normally do all the asanas, pasanas, and all that in the Gita. Okay, so and what is the system of Patanjali? As we already said, there are 8 steps: Yama, Niyama, asanas, pranayama, dharana, dhyana, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. These are the 8 steps. So very briefly, we will discuss these things, what they are. Yamas. Yamas are what you are advised to do. Rather, you should not do. And the niyamas are those which you should do. Okay, so they are the different systems. These systems. So, for instance, the yamas. I am telling you what the yamas are. First of all, yama is ahimsa. That means there should be no violence in mind and in emotion or physically. The ahimsa does not really mean only physical violence. It also means that there should be no hate, there should be no strong emotions against anybody. It should always be a calm, quiet, and beneficial and auspicious emotion towards others. Okay, so that's first is ahimsa. Neither in thought, neither should you think ill of anybody. So that's a real ahimsa. Then asyam, non-stealing. Stealing is forbidden completely. Then satya vachanam, no telling of lies. Okay, satya vachanam. And then finally, the 2 last, brahmacharyam. Brahmacharyam is the sexual purity. When you are a student and you are not yet entered the grihastha stage, you have to maintain sexual purity. Then there is the agrahyam. Agrahyam is not grabbing at everything in a desirous manner. Agrahyam. In other words, you can also think of it positively, a self-contentment. Constantly you are in a contented state. So these are the yamas. Then the niyamas. Okay, what you should do. Shauchyam, you should be clean. In the tropics, certainly you should have 2 baths a day. Okay, in the evening and in the morning. Shauchyam, cleanliness. Swadhyaya, study of Scott, study of scriptures. Wherever you are, whatever scriptures are available to you, you should study them. Then there is tapasya. Tapasya is discipline in a very regular manner. You can say concentration. Tapas is heat. Okay, and heat means when you concentrate something, when you reduce its size, it produces heat. So even when you concentrate, okay, all your thoughts are diverse, and when you concentrate them onto something, it does produce heat. And we know very well that heat purifies. That's how for instance, anything you heat, it purifies it. All these, for instance, if you take iron ore, that's a very good example. If you take iron ore and heat it, the slag, the mud and the slag comes out, and the pure iron becomes molten and it comes out and it becomes pure iron. So that's the uh, tapasya. You should do that with your consciousness. Then Ishvara Pranidhana. Ishvara Pranidhana, the worship of the divine. Okay? And then finally, contentment. You must be in a very calm, quiet, always happy condition. So these are the yamas and the niyamas. Then you come to, these are the basic moral teachings that you will purify. The fundamental, primary, preliminary purification, which is, you can almost consider them to be moral, okay, and ethical. Then you come to studying the body. You do asanas, okay. Asanas actually, and you have to hold the pose for certain things, twistings and turnings and all. It gives flexibility to the body. It also gives great health to the body. So that's asanas. You are preparing the body for the inrush of energies, which are much more in yoga than in the normal life. Then you come to pranayama. Pranayama is the regulation of the breath. Our breath is very, very irregular, and you teach yourself to breathe in a very regular manner. And breathing is the outermost sign of life. Most things, the higher forms of life, they breathe. There is a breathing. So breath, you have to control the breath. There are many types of asanas, pranayamas, but some of the basic things are there. The breathing out is more important than the breathing in. Okay? Because breathing out, when you are breathing out, there are a little residual air is always there in the lungs. So that has to be forced out. Otherwise, it's like the dregs in a glass. Okay, the thickened portion of any juice is there at the bottom of the glass, and that you have to also clean out. So that is the breathing out is necessary. If you breathe in 4 times, you should breathe out at least 6 or 8 times. Okay, that's a count. So that is the pranayama. Once you have prepared your body and your vital, then you come to the mind. And the mind, there are actually 5 stages, but normally in the Raj Yoga, there are only 3 stages. Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. Dharana, the capacity to stay with one thought alone. Normally, it is not possible, and our mind goes on wandering here and there. Okay, so that's what we normally see. But you have to have the capacity to concentrate and keep only one subject in the mind. That's dharana. Dhri, to hold. Okay, that's the rule. Then we have dhyana. In dhyana, you are thinking. There is a flow of thought, but the flow is only in one direction. It's not haphazard. So that's the flow of thought. It's got great power. It should not be haphazard. There should be in one direction alone. Then finally, no thought at all, total silence, and that is samadhi. I missed out on pratyahara, and I'm telling you what pratyahara is. You teach yourself not to be affected by the senses. I think one day we have discussed this. Just as the body needs food, the senses also need food. In other words, it needs input. The eyes need to see, the ears need to hear, and the tongue needs to taste, and the skin needs to touch things. You will see that that's very necessary. Even among the animals, you will see that there is intimacy of animals. You will see that they touch each other. In a very gentle way, they touch each other. If you have got pets at home, you will see the dog comes and with his nose, he touches you. Touch is very important for that. Okay, so you have all these things, and then the senses need the food for its own. That means it needs the sense objects and the sense in impacts which come in. But you must not be affected by them. You must allow all these things to come into you without being affected. That is pratyahara. Pratyahara. Stop feeding the senses. Okay? They should not affect you. It's like all the rivers coming into the sea, but the sea remains absolutely calm and quiet. It remains exactly what it is. That is the pratyahara. So these are the Raj Yoga of Patanjali. Okay? In a very brief manner, we have said that these are but the yoga, when you refer to yoga in the Gita, it is not the yoga system of Patanjali. It is karma yoga. Okay? So, because it's a purely subjective methodology, an internal discipline, limited, rigidly cut out, severely and scientifically graded, by which the mind is progressively stilled and taken up into samadhi, so that we may gain the temporal and eternal results of this self-exceeding. Note the word temporal. There is also a benefit in the physical world, and eternal. In the higher planes of consciousness, they are eternal. They don't change. So both the results you get of the self-exceeding. What is the self-exceeding? Who is exceeding what? Your soul, your consciousness is exceeding the body-mind life. And when that happens, you get the gain is temporal as well as eternal. The temporal in a great expansion of the soul's knowledge and powers, the eternal in the divine union. He is explaining how it becomes great. Okay? You get knowledge. Knowledge even in the physical world increases like anything. Okay? And in the eternal you have the divine union which can become permanent. Now he comes to the yoga of the Gita. Okay? The yoga of the Patanjali he has described to you. Okay? So he said, Sriyamda has said it's an internal discipline, limited, rigidly cut out, but actually he has the asanas and the pranayama are not absolutely internal discipline. Asanas is not really internal. In a sense it is internal because you have to make your steadiness. You keep the body steadiness with an internal discipline, and pranayama also. But these two can be half physical. So Sriyamda has not referred to that very clearly, but he's saying the internal discipline, limited, rigidly cut out. Very, very clear steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Sriyamda's own internal yoga is not rigidly cut out. It is very, very flexible, depending on each one's nature. Okay. So now he comes to the yoga of the Gita, and he describes what it is. But the yoga of the Gita is a large, flexible, and many-sided system with various elements, which are all successfully harmonized by sort of natural and living assimilation. It's a assimilation is very, very practical. And what are those various elements? He will discuss. Okay? And all these elements, Raj Yoga is only one and not the most important and vital. In the Raj Yoga also, the last bit of the mind, the 3 steps of the mind are taken up. Okay? Because it tells you how to make your mind quiet and calm. So this yoga does not adopt any strict and scientific gradation. So the strict and scientific gradation, that's why I went into the 8 limbs. Okay? But in the Gita, the 8 limbs can be not in that order. Okay? It need not be yama, niyama, asanas, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. It need not be like that. Okay? It can be mixed reaction. Okay? So that's the mixed sequence. Sequence. This yoga does not adopt any strict and scientific gradation, but is a process of natural soul development. Each one has got a different nature of the soul, and according to the nature of the soul, the development takes place. As in the Gita, so also in Sriyamda's yoga. It seeks by the adoption of a few principles of subjective poise. It's psychological mainly. I remember discussing something with some people in the ashram itself once. They were Westerners, and when I said that the integral yoga is mainly psychological and not physical based, they were a little surprised. But there is nothing surprising in that, na? Sriyamda's yoga is what? Aspiration, surrender, rejection, and all of them are psychological. Okay, so you work on yourself internally. Sriyamda used the word internal discipline. Okay, so that's what. It seeks by the adoption of a few principles of subjective poise. Okay, and what are those subjective poise and the principles? We will come to that. Okay, we'll discuss that at the end of the para. Poise and action to bring about a renovation of the soul. Note that. Okay? the renovation of the soul. In other words, the old construction is maintained, but it is remodeled. This is the interesting part. Whereas the other systems, they want to reject all the imperfections. But in Srimad Yoga and also in the Samadhi, in the Gita, there is no rejection as such. There is only the remodeling. Srimad is using the word renovation. It's an interesting word. Okay. So, renovation of the soul, making new again what is not perfect, make it perfect. Okay. Srimad uses the word also remodeling. Okay, suppose you think of your being as a house, some of the walls are broken, then something needs to be very dirty, grimy. So you have to take out the grime and repaint it and make it bright. The walls have to be sometimes broken down and reconstructed. And some of the walls need not be there at all. For instance, the ego is a wall. You don't need that. So you remove that wall. So there is a renovation that takes place. It's a very interesting symbol, okay, of the soul, and a sort of change, ascension, or new birth out of the lower nature into the divine. Accordingly, its idea of samadhi is quite different from the ordinary notion of the yogic trance. I'll finish the para and then we'll come back to what is meant by yogic trance and what is samadhi in Gita. While Patanjali gives to works only its initial importance for moral purification and religious concentration, the Gita goes so far as to make works the distinctive characteristic of yoga. Okay? The Gita says works is more important. Change the nature of your works, make it a sacrifice. Whereas in the Patanjali's yoga, you are allowed to continue with your physical actions in the physical world, but that's only a preparation. The ultimate aim is escape from the physical world. But in Gita, it's not an escape from the physical world. All your actions also you are sacrificing and changing them altogether without running away from the physical world. Okay, that's it. While Patanjali gives to works only an initial importance for moral purification and religious concentration, the Gita so far as to make works the distinctive characteristic of yoga. You have to continuously engage in action and make your action not imperfect but perfect according to divine principles. Action to Patanjali is only a preliminary. In the Gita, it's a permanent foundation. You continue to act in the physical world even after liberation. And in Raj Yoga, after liberation, no more interest in the body and the physical world. No action at all. In the Raj Yoga, it has practically to be put aside when its result has been attained, or at any rate ceases very soon to be a means for the yoga. In other words, you don't use the action in the physical world as a help for yoga. You give it up. For the Gita, it's a means for the highest ascent and continues even after the complete liberation of the soul. There is a difference. So, even after you are completely liberated, the aim in Raj Yoga is to escape and go away and melt yourself into the infinite, indeterminable. But for the Gita, with that consciousness, continue to work in the physical world. That's what it is. Okay, clear? So, then, now he's saying, we go back to that, the principles of subjective poise. So what are the principles of subjective poise in the Gita? First is desireless action. Okay. Giving up the desire for the fruit of works. Nishkama karma. Then you have to go beyond the three gunas. You have to lose your identification with body, mind, life. Nistrai gunyam. Trigunatita. You have to become Trigunatita. Okay. And also the sense of doership. Ego has to disappear. In other words, you are not the doer. The doership of action has to be renounced. You are not doing anything. You have to realize it's a universal nature which is doing through you, making you dance like a puppet. And you are not even conscious of it. So this is the liberation will give you that knowledge. So this is what he's saying in this paragraph. Okay? So, Sankhya earlier he has said, in Sankhya there is the three modes of nature, the Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, which the Gita accepts. But in the Sankhya, it's a path of knowledge. Okay? You withdraw from action and you go to a passivity. Whereas in the Gita, it is only you go to the Ishvara, you go to the highest level but continue to work in the physical world. These are the differences between the Sankhya and the Gita and the Yoga and the Gita. Okay? In both Sankhya as well as Yoga, the aim is to liberation. But in the Gita, liberation is only the primary step. After liberation, continue to work in the physical world. But note now, Sri Aurobindo comes in and goes to a third level. The first level is liberation for most of the Indian systems of yoga. The second is the Gita, which says liberation is fine, but that's the first step. Continue to work in the physical world, maintain the action in the physical world so that nothing is disturbed in the manifestation. Loka Sangrahana Artham. Okay? So this is the maintain the structure of the physical world by participating in it, not by running away. That's the idea. Now Sri Aurobindo comes in and says, fine, step number 1, liberation is absolutely essential. Step number 2, not running away from the physical world also is fine. But what about perfecting the lower? That's the third one. Okay, so that's Sri Aurobindo goes to the third one. He goes beyond the Gita also. Clear? The 3 steps of yoga. Alright? So, now we can read the next one. It's almost 1 page. This much has to be said in order to avoid any confusion of thought. So, who will read?
I can.
Yes, you can. Go
This
ahead.
much has to be said. This much has to be said in order to avoid any confusion of thought that might be created by the use of familiar words in a connotation wider than the technical sense now familiar to us. Still, all that is essential in the Sankhya and Yoga systems, all in them that is large, Catholic, and universally true, is admitted by the Gita, even though it does not limit itself by them like the opposing schools. Its Sankhya is the Catholic and Vedantic Sankhya, such as we find it in its first principles and elements in the great Vedantic synthesis of the Upanishads and in the later developments of the Puranas. Its idea of yoga is that large idea of a principally subjective practice and inner change, necessary for the finding of the self or the union with God, of which the Raja Yoga is only one special application. The Gita insists that Sankhya and Yoga are not two different, incompatible, and discordant systems, but one in their principle and aim. They differ only in their method and starting point. The Sankhya also is a yoga, but it proceeds by knowledge. It starts, that is to say, by intellectual discrimination and analysis of the principles of our being and attains its aim through the vision and possession of the truth. Yoga, on the other hand, proceeds by works. It is in its first principle Karma Yoga. But it is evident from the whole teaching of the Gita and its later definitions that the word karma is used in a very wide sense, and that by yoga is meant the selfless devotion of all the inner as well as the outer activities as a sacrifice to the Lord of all works, offered to the eternal as master of all the soul's energies and austerities. Yoga is the practice of the truth of which knowledge gives the vision, and its practice has for its motor power a spirit of illumined devotion, of calm or fervent consecration to that which knowledge sees to be the highest.
Yeah. So he is again making a distinction between the Sankhya and the, he is discussing here, in the previous one he has discussed the yoga. Now he is discussing the Sankhya and his difference with the Gita. So this much has to be said in order to avoid any confusion of thought that might be created by the use of familiar words. The word yoga in the Gita as well as in the Raj Yoga are differently used. That's why he's making a distinction. The word is common to both, but you have to make a distinction. What do you mean by yoga in Raj Yoga and what do you mean by yoga in the Gita? He's making a distinction. That's what he's going to explain to us. He has explained already, but that's what he said. This much has to be said in order to avoid any confusion of thought that might be created by the use of familiar words in a connotation wider than the technical sense now familiar to us. Now when we speak of yoga, it's the Raj Yoga. And now when we speak of Karma Yoga, it is Karma Yoga, as in the Gita. Still, all that is essential in the Sankhya and Gita systems, all in them that is large, Catholic, and universally true, is admitted by the Gita, even though it does not limit itself by them like the opposing schools. The opposing schools also say, no, they are totally different. How they are different also we will see. Okay? And the word Catholic is clear, it's nothing to do with religion. It means very wide-minded, all-embracing, not narrow. Okay? Which Catholic means all-embracing. It widens its wings and not like some of the other religions which are very narrow and say that only this has to be done and nothing else. The Gita is very Catholic. It includes all the systems and it's a synthesis. That is large and Catholic and universally true. There are things which are universally true in Sankhya and there are universally truths in yoga systems, Raj Yoga, and the Gita accepts all of these. It's Sankhya. Now, the Sankhya of the Gita is described. Its Sankhya is a Catholic and Vedantic Sankhya, such as we find it in its first principles and elements in the great Vedantic synthesis of the Upanishads. It does not limit itself in the Upanishads. That means all the planes of consciousness are valid and at each plane of consciousness there is a difference. So the Sankhya limits itself to one plane and says that's the ultimate truth. But that's not true because you can be below and you can be above. If you are below that required plane of consciousness, you are Triguna, you are Trigunyam, you are in the identified with the body, mind, life. But if you are going to the aim of Sankhya is Trigunatita. You have to become beyond the three gunas. So you have to go beyond the three gunas. And that's the difference between the
When we say Triguna, it is Sattva Rajas Tamas only, no?
Yes, that's right. The gunas are the Sattva Rajas Tamas. In other words, you want to become very clear with the body, identification with the body, the vital and the mind. Okay, that's what we all are. We always think that this is what I am. Actually, you are not. You are the pure soul. Okay, so that's in the Sankhya we find these first principal elements. So, and in the later developments of the Puranas. The Puranas also are a branch of knowledge in India, which are they are so records of histories, they say, okay, but not history as understood in the West. Purana, that which is ancient. Okay, there are many Puranas there. 27, 28 Puranas are there. Vishnu Purana, then all sorts of other Puranas are there. Vishnu Purana is one which Ramdo read in great detail. I tried to read it, but it's not very easy to understand because it's all symbolic. Okay, it describes the first origins of the universe, how it came and all that. So it's history in a spiritual sense, not in the Western sense of history. Okay, so Purana. Then its ideas of yoga, its ideas means in the Gita. Its ideas of yoga is that large idea of a principally subjective practice. And we know that the Gita suggests the three methods of the getting rid of the nishkama karma, getting rid of the um, desire for fruit of works, okay, and also the ego and surrender. These are the principles that it constantly stresses upon the Gita. Its idea of yoga is that large idea of a principally subjective practice and inner change necessary for the finding of the self or union with God. So it is making a difference. Now, what is the difference between finding of the self and union with God? The finding of the self is when you go to the spiritual planes of consciousness and you have a cosmic consciousness. Okay, that's level 2 if you want. But union with God is a transcendent aspect. When Srivda uses the word God with a G cap, he is talking of the personal aspect of the divine as well as the impersonal aspect of the divine. So when he says finding of the self is a cosmic consciousness of the second level, the spiritual planes of consciousness. And union with God is the transcendent. But transcendent does not necessarily mean supermind. Huh? Be very clear about that. Okay? Transcendent means you are outside the universe. You are experiencing the divine only. And there is no question of the universe being anywhere near. That's what is meant by transcendence. Okay? Not necessarily the spiritual, the supramental. Huh? Be very clear about that. The supermind is transcendent, but the transcendent is not necessarily supermind. You have to be clear about that. Okay. Union with God or finding of the self, of which they are not equivalent terms. Huh? Otherwise, he won't mention. Finding of the self is a cosmic. The union with God is a transcendent. Okay. Of which the Raj Yoga is only one special application. The Raj Yoga aims at disappearing into the self, but in the Gita it is more than that. You come down again. So Raj Yoga is used in the Gita, but only in one particular aspect, only in getting rid of the slavery in the physical world. You become liberation. You get liberation. The Gita insists that Sankhya and Yoga are not two different, incompatible and discordant systems. Because Sankhya says, don't do works, concentrate only in the mind and go up. And the Karma Yoga says, no, do works and sacrifice and get to the... So the aim is the same in both, liberation. But the methods are different. That's why the Gita says, I don't care for the methods, I will combine. They are not opposites. One is going from path A, the other is going from path B, but they end up in the same. So why should they be different? Only different methods. Are not two different, incompatible and discordant systems, but one in their principle and aim. The principle is liberation and the aim also is to get liberation. They differ only in their method and starting point. One starts by rejecting the physical world and action, and the other starts by accepting the physical world and action in the physical world. The Sankhya also is a yoga, but it proceeds by knowledge, not practical works. Sankhya is a sort of Jnana Yoga, you can say that. Whereas the Karma Yoga is not Jnana Yoga. It starts with action, concentrates on action, and offers all its actions to the divine. Sacrifice. The idea of sacrifice, yajna, in the Gita. It starts, that is to say, by intellectual discrimination, analysis of the principles of our being, and attains its aim through the vision and possession of the truth. So, intellectual discrimination, you must be able to distinguish between the false and the true, the permanent and the impermanent. That's usually what they say. Okay, you proceed by intellectual discrimination, viveka. Okay? You understand what is right and what is the permanent and what is the temporal. And analysis the principles of our being, very clearly the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, analysis the principles of our being, and attains its aim through the vision and possession of the truth. So, finally, you go at the lower level, you are discriminating and using the analytical method of the Sankhya, and finally you rise and become Trigunatita. You go beyond the three gunas. Yoga, on the other hand, proceeds by works. It is Karma Yoga. Okay? It is, in its first principle, Karma Yoga. But it is evident from the whole teaching of the Gita and its later definitions that the word karma is used in a very wide sense, and that by yoga is meant this selfless devotion of all the inner as well as the outer activities as a sacrifice to the Lord of all works. So karma yoga, when you say, you are talking only of the will and the physical actions. All physical actions you turn to the divine. But in the Gita, physical action, vital emotions, mental thoughts, all are offered by sacrifice to the divine. Okay? That's a different ceremonial point. Then, and by yoga is meant the selfless devotion of all the inner as well as the outer activities as a sacrifice to the Lord of all works, offered to the eternal as master of all the soul's energies and austerities. He is the one to whom you are offering all your, when you are sacrificing, to whom are you sacrificing? You are sacrificing to the Lord of all works. When you speak of the Lord, very clearly, it is the personal and the impersonal aspect of the divine. The Purushottama, okay? Not the impersonal aspect of the divine at the second level. It is not that. Offered to the eternal as master of all soul's energies and austerity. When he uses the word Lord and Master, he means exactly the supramental. Okay? Because there the personal and the impersonal merge, and you are also the master. You become the master of all your soul's energies. Means even in the physical world, you are able to control and change all your physical actions. Whereas in the second level of the liberation, you don't have power. Okay? You don't have normally power to change the physical world. Even if you have a little bit of change, not complete transformation. So, this is what I mean. Yoga is the practice of the truth, of which knowledge gives the vision, and its practice has for its motor power a spirit of illumined devotion. Now see, he is bringing in devotion. Bhakti is a very essential part of the Gita. Whereas bhakti is not so much a part of the Rajoga. It's purely a mental process. Rajoga does not care much for devotion. But this devotion is an illumined devotion. In other words, the devotion is based on knowledge. Illumination is light, and light is knowledge. Okay? So that's what it is. Of calm or fervent concentration. Fervent. Okay? To that which knowledge sees to be the highest. So your concentration can be very calm, or it can also be very passionate. Okay? But over passionateness, Hindu does not approve of. That is what Ramakrishna did, and he had to suffer for it. Okay? Too much of vehemence. He is not using the word vehement, he is using the word fervent, passionate concentration to that which knowledge sees to be the highest. So, Gita uses the mental method of Jnana Yoga. It also uses the Bhakti Yoga for devotion, and it also uses the Karma Yoga for sacrifice. That's the difference. So, now he is going into Sankhya. He explains what Sankhya is. So, actually I have got a chart for the Sankhya chart. So, I will do one thing. I will put it on the computer. So, but all of you are not on the computer. You are only in the audio, na? So, how to do this? Okay, I can send it to you by email. Okay? The 24 principles of Prakriti. It's a chart which I have made and which explains all the different. Sir has spoken about analysis, na? So this is the analysis. The 24. Yeah, pardon?
Could you read it out, man?
Yes,
and then you can.
I can do that. I'll do that. Okay? But that's what he's going to. So should we? Let's do one thing. It's already 8:31. So I will just read this para, or rather, one of you has to read the para, and next time we will do the chart. By that time, I'll probably be able to put it on your email. I'll put it. But today, before we read this para, giving you the chart is of no use. So first we'll read the para where he describes in text, but not graphic image. Okay? So, Archana Di, will you read the para? It's not a very big one. We can finish it.
Not able to read. Somebody can read.
Okay.
Anybody can speak.
And then I have to go. So please excuse me.
Pallavi, you can go. Anybody.
Okay. Okay. Anyone? Go ahead.
Shall I read?
Yes. Yes. Shilpa, read. But what are the
Of Sankhya. The philosophy drew its name from its analytical process. Sankhya is the analysis, the enumeration, the separative and discriminative setting forth of the principles of our being, of which the ordinary mind sees only the combinations and results of combinations. It did not seek at all to synthesize. Its original standpoint is in fact dualistic, not with the very relative dualism of the Vedantic schools, which call themselves by that name Dvaita, but in a very absolute and prescient fashion. For it explains existence not by one, but by two original principles whose interrelation is the cause of the universe. Purusha, the inactive, Prakriti, the active. Purusha is the soul, not in the ordinary or popular sense, but conscious being immobile, immutable, and self-luminous. Prakriti is energy and its process. Purusha does nothing, but it reflects the action of energy and its process. Prakriti is mechanical, but by being reflected in Purusha, it assumes the appearance of consciousness in its activities. And thus, there are created those phenomena of creation, conservation, dissolution, birth and life and death, consciousness and unconsciousness, sense knowledge and intellectual knowledge, and ignorance, action and inaction, happiness and suffering, which the Purusha, under the influence of Prakriti, attributes to itself, although they belong not at all to itself, but to the action or movement of Prakriti alone.
Okay, so this is what he has described the principles. Okay, so he has described Purusha and Prakriti and their interaction. Then in the next paragraph also, he goes into great detail to tell you the analytical. So next time we will redo this one and see exactly what he's saying. What exactly is Purusha? What exactly is Prakriti? How does it become a dualistic system? Okay, and also the analysis, the 24 principles of the Guna. Note the word Sankhya. Sankhya. In our Indian languages, Sankhya means the number. Okay, so it gets its name from there. So Sankhya says that there are 24 basic principles, and those basic principles, that's what we'll do. I'll send it to you by email, and then we can discuss that in a little bit of detail. It's not really necessary for understanding the Gita, but it's better to know what the Sankhya is. Okay. Okay, so we are at 8:35. So we stop for today.
Have a nice weekend.
Rangada.